Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to have a look through the new Hail Caesar supplement, The Wars of the Roses. I'm going to do a bit of a flick through the pages, talk about reasons for getting this supplement and an interesting direction this may lead in. A couple of caveats, I suppose. My review is very much going to be coming as somebody who's pretty new to the period. I have watched a couple of YouTube videos of documentaries that were on TV in the past. I've read some Wikipedia pages, but generally speaking, my knowledge of the Wars of the Roses is quite limited. If you want sort of experts poring over the details of the book and coming at it from sort of the more historically minded bent, then perhaps go over to Seventh Son. Martin there knows more about Wars of Roses than any other YouTuber I've come across anyway, so he's good for it. The other caveat is that the author, Rob Grayston, I have known for probably more than 20 years, going back to when we were interested in playing Inquisitor, Games Workshop's sort of role-playing game. And it's kind of come in full circle that his day job is kind of acquainted with sort of an area I'm doing research in, so we've been talking more recently. But I was a happy surprise that this book was coming out. I bought it out of my interest in toy soldiers in general, and hopefully Rob gets a bit of royalties from each copy sold. So the book itself is full of lovely pictures, both Peter Dennis illustration and Michael and Alan Perry's range of figures that they have photographed in various battle setups. Looking, I've had a read through the book. I quite like that it's sort of coming from the point of view that it's fun just to get models on the table, and if you're willing to not be sticking just to the possibly debatable historical record, you can make up characters and games and use units to represent different households, just to get models on the table and play. Useful stuff as a newcomer is that there's even a glossary for some of the terms for the period. A background to how the Wars of the Roses started. And that not just considers the House of York and House of Lancaster, but also talks about what's going on in Western Europe at the time. Has useful charts giving, for example, the rulers in the different kingdoms at the time. And I think this is one of the most useful pieces in the whole book. There's a timeline of major events and what happened to the infamous characters of the period. Lots of battles, lots of deaths, lots of executions. It's a little bit about how armies of this period would be constituted, how they were brought together as arrays under a lord, and talks about how they fought in battle as well. Bows and billmen and men-at-arms sort of fighting shoulder to shoulder. A little bit about cavalry, gunpowder, sieges. That was quite a big part of the period, but perhaps not that. The book is not particularly focused on sieges, but there are some options for including defensive positions in some of the scenarios that come later. Livery was obviously really important. There's a useful sort of guide to some of the colours that were worn, some of the badges. I would have liked more of this, but I understand the book's really not here to educate on all the different types of livery. But between this and the Perry box sets and general internet searching, you can find signs and flags for most of the lords that were involved. You've got background for major players, useful things telling if they were Yorkists with white roses and Lancastrian with red roses. It takes you through sort of all the fellas you might be expecting to lead your troops on the battlefield, and gives them different rules to sort of individualize everyone. There's rules specific to the period, which make it a bit different from your run-of-the-mill games of Hail Caesar. That's a great thing about Hail Caesar, I think, is that it's very easy to modify the rules. It's more sort of a sandbox guide, and you can tweak it to get things which are more appropriate for the time periods you're fighting in. We've got army lists, how to make your battle a bit more interesting, perhaps with terrain and weather effects. Favours makes your characters, again, your leaders a bit more interesting based on what they know can have effects on setup or treachery, which is a nice era appropriate feature of the rules. And then we get into a lot of battles. So the vast majority of these are based on battles that occurred, but there are what-if scenarios. Now, what-if ones can be quite good fun. There's a lot of almost battles in this period where people mustered armies but then didn't quite fire any arrows in anger. And then we push on into some of the real battles, so not just wide open fields. There's St Albans, sort of an urban battle, which would be quite interesting for manoeuvring around the streets, I think, in this game. And all this information, I think, as well, is not only useful for Hail Caesar, but perhaps if you wanted to play something a bit more skirmishy, some Lion Rampant, for example. Not played, never mind the billhooks, but again, this information I think would work in any game system set in the period. Now, I am a Scot, so the Wars of the Roses essentially is sort of between houses of England fighting it out, but Marguerite of Anjou fled to Scotland, so did Henry VI at one point, and the Scots had some involvement as mercenaries, providing forces for the Lancastrians. But there's a section towards the end of all these scenarios, which has Siege of Carlisle. I'll flick to that. Battle of Bosworth, where Richard III fell. Nice colour photos from Perry's there. So there's this nice section about Scotland, rebels in France. Siege of Carlisle, yeah. So this is something that's mentioned in the history books to a small extent, but then there's not much more detail on it. And then we get to the one that's really made me sit up and go, well, if ever there was a reason to get into a period, you can't really have a weirder way to want to do it. So this is a what-if scenario about a potential battle between English and Scots in 1482. So it's a little bit of background. James III had various treaties with Edward IV that kind of got reneged on. And Richard of Gloucester, who became Richard III, was tasked with sending an army north to stomp all over the Scots, basically. However, the Scottish court was filled with infighting, perhaps just as much as England was at the time, and James III's army fell to pieces in the borders, where some of his associates were hung from Lauder Bridge. Now, I'm from the borders, and Lauder is a town that's about 5 miles from where I grew up with. And the very very village that I grew up in is modern-day Oxton in Berwickshire. So this is absolutely hilarious to me that the very fields that I used to play in as a boy have been included in this map here in this book, which is a total coincidence, even though I've known Rob for 20 plus years. He was as surprised as I was when I told him that you've put in my home village in your book. So this is really interesting, and I think when you find something that sort of has a piece in your own memory, it kind of makes you want to jump feet first into a new period. So I don't really have much in the way of a Wars of the Roses collection or anything at this point, so it will be from scratch. But the history of Scotland is obviously important to me, and it's very interesting for wargaming as well. The medieval period is something that I didn't know very much about at all. In the Borders, your sort of history sort of points you at the Romans who lived in Trimontium near Melrose, and then later you've got the Border Reivers being a big part of the history. But the sort of the medieval part in the centre, there's not a whole lot that I knew about from sort of local knowledge. So this is really interesting for me. It may be a bit fantasy, of course, but having the opportunity to fight out a battle and paint new models is always good. And certainly from my point of view, as a commissioned painter, it's useful if I know how to paint a vast majority of periods, and Wars of the Roses, sort of the later medieval period, is not something that I have done. So we may be getting into this. So that's a waffle through this book. I hope it's been useful for people to be able to look at some of the pages. Really good book if you're a novice to the period, and having many scenarios laid out with the history behind them, a campaign system, means that I think you can sort of dive in with both feet to this period with this book. And while perhaps from a personal point of view, I'd like more of the sort of the livery of the different lords, looking at them in the centered in units rather than just looking at sort of the individuals. Lovely models as they are, it might have been more useful to have a lord surrounded by his household, so you could see what a unit might look like when you're painting. But understand that space is a premium in these publications, and the information is out there, just requires a little bit more work. So thanks for watching. The channel will continue to put out painting guides. I won't just be abandoning sort of the Napoleonic period, which I paint most of, but you might start to see some new stuff, some medieval things, and who knows, in a year or two I might actually be able to put on a Battle of Ugston and have some fun with some men with big long spears. Right, thanks for watching. Bye for now.